This episode of the Fine Homebuilding Podcast is brought to you by Loctite's PL Premium Max. Say no to outdated and rundown. Say yes to projects that last with Loctite's PL Premium Max construction adhesive. Indoor or out, PL Premium Max is our toughest construction adhesive. It can be applied in all weather conditions and bonds to any common building material. Whether you're framing a custom home, upgrading to granite counters, or fixing up your latest flea market find, PL Premium Max is the right adhesive for the job. Say yes to a second chance. Say yes to Loctite. Visit LoctiteProducts.com for more information. Hey podcast listeners, be sure to check out Fine Homebuilding's e-learning opportunities. We've created a special discount coupon just for you. Learn about sustainable home building, using mini-split heat pumps, insulation, finished carpentry, and more. See all of what's available at courses.finehomebuilding.com and then use the special code podcast20 for a discount on any class. That's podcast20 in all caps. Thanks for listening.
And one of the projects was to put a fresh coat of paint on the garage doors. And of course, note to future self, next time you get asked if you can just freshen my garage doors up with, freshen anything up with a coat of paint, the answer is probably not.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Contributing Editor and TDS Custom Construction Production Manager Ian Schwant.
Hello, everybody.
Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Good morning.
And Taunton Senior Producer Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, gents, good to see you this morning. Look, I got my Keep Craft Alive shirt on, which delights me.
The long sleeve version of it.
Yeah, it's getting to be fall, Ian, so, need the right gear. And y'all might have noticed.
We had 90-degree heat followed by like a day where it barely got out of the 40s. Here already. It just keeps going back and forth.
40s, really?
Welcome to the Midwest.
Man, we've been getting a lot of rain this morning. If you guys hear that through my microphone, I apologize. I don't know really what to do about it. I got, the shed roof right above me with no intermediate ceiling, so it gets kind of loud. So it's quiet right now. How you guys doing?
Good.
Did you get tons of rain, Jeff?
Yeah.
How about you, Brian? Has the rain affected your recent grass seeding?
I knew you were going to ask that, Patrick. When you plant grass seed, you're in a large area anyway, you're just at the mercy of the weather. And I seeded, I did a whole bunch of grading. I moved 16 yards of topsoil, and then I did all this seeding and laid down straw on top of it. And then we had one of the hottest, driest weeks of the summer, followed by the two rainiest weeks of the summer. And the rain isn't coming in a nice light sprinkle. It's coming in these deluges. So I would say that all of the grass seed that I put down is piled in one place at the bottom of the slope, and with the straw, that's pretty much where we're at. I tried to straighten things out a little bit last night, and then we just got dumped on, as you mentioned, this morning, Patrick. So
it must have been a half an inch of rain or more this morning in probably an hour's time, is my guess.
And it's what our weather's been here for a while now.
Yeah.
So I don't expect that I'm going to have a nice lawn anytime soon.
So do you go and try and sweep up the grass seed? How's that work? What do you do?
Well, that's what I did last night, actually. I just took a rake and, it just everything just kind of finds its way to every low spot, right? So I just took a rake and I tried to sort of using the straw as my measure, hopefully finding that the grass seed is near the straw, I just kind of spread it all back out. And there are some places where it actually took pretty quickly and that we have some grass growing. But yeah, the places where the rain hit the hardest, it just got decimated. So I'll probably, usually I've been taught to overseed. So once you start to get some grass coming in, then you spread some more seed. So I'm gonna just, I'm gonna plan to do that. Hopefully we get some grass started in the bigger areas, and then I'll overseed it. And I just don't want to have mud. I don't need.
No, and it's
I'm
a
not
catch.
looking for a nice lawn. I'm not fertilizing or doing any weed control. I just don't want to have mud.
It's
Well, Brian, at
erosion
least you
control,
don't live
right?
in Greenwich like Jeff and Patrick, where you'd be both shamed and fined for your poorly grown in and manicured lawn.
I don't know what you did, Ian, but I just get the sod company to come and just roll it out there. I don't know what you.
You do that every year, right, Patrick?
Ian, you sent some photos of your amazing new LVT floor. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we just hit the 2-year mark of living in the house, which meant
Can
that
I
it's
just say
time.
that was really hard for me to believe that, but yeah, if you do
It was
the math,
hard for
it
me
makes
to believe it too,
Yeah.
but that means it's time to start cracking on some of these projects. And the big one on Sarah's mind was she was sick of the painted concrete floor in our bedroom, so we found an LVT or LVP floor that we liked that came in 7.25 wide by 5 foot vinyl planks. So it has a similar look to what we put in on the main floor. And I laid that in our bedroom and our walk-in closet laundry room a couple of weekends ago. For the most part, went down really well. And Patrick, you pointed out that because of the reglets that we did at the bottom of the drywall, instead of doing traditional baseboard, that did complicate it a little bit. And one thing that I did was I double stick taped my first course down at the wall where I started so that I could have it sitting gapped properly in the reglet, since I can't get back there to put any kind of shims in. And then I worked off of that. And I was telling Jeff before you guys got on that for the final course, I actually had to rip off part of the tongue that snaps into the already installed piece and double stick tape that one down too on the uh, end of the run inside the room. Wasn't quite as big a deal in the closet because it went up to cabinet toe kicks, but so I have 2 spots now in our bedroom where it is double stick tape down that I'll have to pay close attention to.
So this is
We should tell folks the complication here is that the flooring you installed like locks at the leading edge and then
Yep.
swings down, and because
Yes.
you have this recess at the bottom of your walls, you can't install it like you would ordinarily, right?
Correct. I only have a 1/2 inch of play. So my reglet is a 1/2 inch square. It stands a 1/2 an inch off the floor, and then it goes a 1/2 an inch in for the 1/2 inch drywall. I did bang into the reglet in a couple of spots as I was doing this, and found it to be surprisingly forgiving of me bashing into it. I was a little bit worried that I was going to create a bunch of drywall mudding work, but I seem to have gotten away without
Is it
it.
plastic, Ian, or is it metal? The reglet
I
molding.
used a plastic one from Trimtex. So you can do the fry reglet or some of the other aluminum ones, but when you start pricing that for an entire house like I did, that gets to be a king's ransom in reglets, and no longer any kind of money or time saving over running baseboard everywhere.
And have you, just curious, because I think, I love the look, by the way. It's like, for anyone who hasn't seen this, it's sort of like, imagine a house without baseboard, and instead the drywall comes down and has this really crisp shadow line where it
Yep.
where it meets the floor. I think it looks super, Ian. But I'm curious, like, I think a lot of, maybe some of the skepticism of the detail would be that you would, this is a place prone to damage, and you might kick your drywall and stuff. Are you finding that, or hit it with a vacuum and ding it? Are you finding any of that to be the case?
I'm not, but again, we don't have children, so we don't have
Yeah.
the kids and toys and things like that. We have our 2 little dogs, which don't do much damage there, and then we have one of those little robo vacuums that goes around, on a app timer and vacuums the house while we're not there.
When you're not there, it just bashes into that reglet
Probably, yeah. It's just
time
like
after
just
time.
smacking into the wall. Yeah, we haven't really found that. There are a couple of places where we did do traditional baseboard, but inset into the wall with the reglet above it, like in our entrance to the house, we did that. The main floor powder room has that, as does the scullery. So those are the areas where we felt we should go with baseboard, just because it's kind of a higher traffic, more moving around with shoes and boots on area than, say, the living room or bedroom.
It looks great. I think you're crazy
Yeah.
because I bet it complicates every part of construction.
Sure does. My drywall
Yeah.
guys hated it. They bought a little mechanics creeper, and one of the smaller guy in the crew just kind of skidded around the whole house on the mechanics creeper and taped it off. But they were not thrilled with me.
I did a story for Fine Homebuilding with Joe Militia, who's a carpenter down in the Greenwich Gold Coast area, and it seemed like a colossal pain in the butt, is all I can say. But it looks fantastic.
I also have been planning my ground level deck outside of our bedroom, which I want to connect to our main floor screen porch with a set of stairs. And I was having a bit of a back and forth with Mike Gerton on some of the deck stairs that he's built, because he's built some pretty interesting curved stairs. And I had recalled a few articles that he had done in Fine Homebuilding and JLC about these sets of stairs. So I was kind of peppering him with questions, because I of course start with really crazy ideas and then work my way back to something that I can actually do. And crazy idea number one was to do like a half an ellipse type staircase, because it would cantilever over one of the garden areas that Sarah has established. And we kind of had some interesting ideas of things that we could do in that space that would blend the staircase to her landscaping. And in classic Mike Gerton fashion, he didn't ultimately come out and tell me that that was a stupid idea and wouldn't work, but he definitely led the horse to the water trough and kind of left me there for a while. And I quickly realized that I would not be able to meet any type of code standard for the line of travel 12 inches in from the smaller radius of the ellipse, because part of that, my mind was thinking I just had to have a minimum. But Mike reminded me that it's not just a minimum, but it's also you have a small tolerance that each one of these tread depths along that line of travel needs to be the same. And there was no way I was going to be able to do that with an ellipse.
So you have to do it with a circle, right?
You have to do it with a circle. So what I'm going to do now is kind of make like a letter J shaped stairs in plan view, where they'll come down straight, and then at some point they'll break into a half circle wherever I can make that work.
Will you make the stringers out of steel or wood? How's that going to work?
That's where I had to reach out to Mike, because he has done several articles on doing PT laminated stringers. And that's what I had wanted to do. And he's got a couple of different ways that you can do it. I'll see if I can get some of the emails from Mike and put it in the show notes. There was one YouTube video that he sent me that was particularly interesting in the way that this carpenter chose to build those stairs. And I think it's eye-opening for people who have these ideas to see that there are incredibly complex ways to do it, and then some pretty simplified ways that other people have already tested and come up with.
That sounds like an amazing staircase and a potential fine home building piece, right?
Yeah.
Is it safe to say for people who aren't familiar with stair building, and I mean, obviously one of the biggest challenges with a stair like this is just how do you create the curved stringers, but when it comes to what you mentioned before, the walk line, essentially when you have a curved or winder stair, is it safe to say that the walk line is a place in the center of the stair where the stairs must meet the building codes?
Right. Typically it's 12 inches in from the inside radius. So if you
Assuming
think
you're
about
holding a handrail and walking.
assuming you're holding a
okay.
handrail and walking down that, but that's sort of the standard that gets applied by building code officials to one of those sets of stairs.
Yeah. So when you plan geometry, you have to make sure that your stairs meet that.
Right. And what Mike was doing was he was getting me to think about how the geometry of the elliptical shape does it, you can't fit it into the code. You
Right.
could fit parts of it in, but then you have to take the whole thing in the aggregate when you're talking about the walk line and the uniformity of tread depth.
And that stuff has to be uniform or people fall, right? That's the worry. And especially if
that's the idea.
An outdoor stair that could be poorly illuminated, you could have,
Yep.
party and folk maybe.
Not in my house, Patrick. Come on, we're Puritans.
I learned how important that is. I've been talking about my front porch since I came back to the podcast. I learned how important that is over the 6 months that before I did the porch repairs, where the stairs, because I built these box style stairs because I only needed 3 risers. So I built these box style stairs, and the last riser is actually from the top step of the built stairs up onto the porch. And the grade had settled, so that top step had become much taller than the bottom 2 steps. It's only 3 steps up, and I saw people trip after being warned that I would stand at the top of the stairs and say, just be careful on the stairs. They've settled a little, and that top step is big, and the people would still trip coming up. That's how trained we are on stairs being uniform and safe.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did with our main stairwell inside the house was we went with the commercial rise and run of 7 and 11 instead of the 7.5 to 8 to 10. And just the difference I've seen that make, especially amongst my older relatives when they've come over to the house. And I have one in particular who's in his very late 70s and was roughed up pretty good in Vietnam, so he doesn't get around all that well. But I remember showing him the basement space of the house and him getting to the top of the stairs and going, what's different about these stairs? Because this was really easy for me to get up. So like Brian was saying, we are really conditioned to some pretty specific standards when it comes to stairs.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that geometry of commercial stairs. I think it's comfortable and safe. I understand, it eats up a lot of floor space.
Yep.
But I think it's great. And I remember a while back we had a article in Fine Homebuilding on a house that was designed by an architect whose work was pretty other than her own house, which we published, whose work was commercial. And she said, I think this is the way to do stairs. And she put those stairs in her house. And she commented that she had got, comments from everyone who ascended those stairs about something's different here and it feels really good.
If y'all listening have any thoughts on stairs, your own, ours, Brian's, please share them with the podcast. We always appreciate hearing from you. And, I think it's probably one of the barometers of someone who's a good builder / carpenter who can figure out the math and geometry and make a safe, functional staircase, even in, less than ideal conditions, small spaces, whatever. I think it can be done usually. Can you guys believe this is our 600th Fine Homebuilding podcast? It blew my mind when I started working on the script today. And Brian, you were there at the beginning of the genesis of the podcast. Do you remember how it came about?
Well, it was a project that I was a little off the hook on, in the way that I was asked to be on the podcast, but I was not asked to be involved really in the planning and of the podcast. So remember that Robbie Egan and Justin Fink kind of led the way on that. And podcasts were new. We knew we had to do it. We didn't know exactly what it should be.
And as I recall, Fine Woodworking had already started one, right? And it was decided important to the brand, Jeff's nodding, that Fine Homebuilding should have one too.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we used to, Patrick, as you know, I mean, we used to work all day and then get together at lunchtime and go eat our lunch in the cafeteria and talk about building houses and things that we're working on, and what we're learning. And the idea at the beginning was like, let's just take this to the podcast room, record it, and see how it goes. And thanks to our listeners, the show evolved in a really great way, where now it's as much or more about listeners than it is about us doing this. And you I think, Patrick, deserve credit for recognizing that when you took over as host and sort of formatting the show around listener feedback and listener questions. I love the way it's evolved, and I have been here and not here. And I think I told you when I was returning, you said, "Are you going to be able to do the podcast?" And I said, "That's really probably going to be the best part of my week." So anytime, I still love doing it.
It is super fun. Jeff, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it has evolved tremendously, and just I've been involved in most of the episodes. I mean, because of the 600, that includes the Pro Talks, which up until like a year ago, I did all of those as well. So
I am sure you are sick to death of hearing our voices. I bet you wake up in the dreams of editing podcasts.
It's the only people I know.
I want to thank our listeners once again, because as Brian just pointed out, the show success is because of you, and I am grateful for that. It's really the best part of the show. Speaking of which, this comes from Nick, and Nick is furthering the conversation on LED lighting. Hey, FHB podcast crew, LED strip lighting has come up in a few recent episodes, and I agree with everything you've been saying. It's hard to figure out. All the components are different. There's not a single great source of information, and it opens up so much potential for amazing lighting. All of this comes right when I've started my own LED strip project in some buildings I'm making for our living room renovation. I'll attach a photo of my haphazard and incomplete attempt. So did you guys have a chance to look at Nick's living room? I think we're looking at the back side of his media wall, right? And what delights me about the photograph is it reinforces something I've observed in other listeners' project is our listeners are really ambitious. This house is completely torn apart, right?
Yeah.
Down to the cans of spray foam that are in the background. I had to look to see all the different things Nick was using in his renovation. Nick says, not sure how open you are to working with a YouTuber for this kind of thing, but there's a channel called The Hookup, which I found to be a wealth of info on LED strips and plenty of other home automation projects. He's got a good focus on regular home lighting and not turning your rooms into Twitch gaming streamer dens. I had to look up what a Twitch gaming streamer den was, but I think I decided I need one. Might be a good relationship available there, since you've mentioned needing more info on home automation as well. Good luck, and thanks for all you do. Always inspiring. Nick, Columbus, Ohio. Thanks, Nick. That was cool. Do you have any LEDs in your house, Ian?
Yeah, they're all LED lights. They're all
Yeah.
the LED disc lights, so that they could be switched out later for traditional like hanging fixtures or other light fixtures.
Have you had any reliability problems with any of these? I've heard some folks complain Not yet. Good. Yeah.
Not yet, and they were like $5 a piece, so that to me seems a little bit shocking that I haven't had any yet.
I put, for the first time, some additional lighting in Carol's gardening space, which I've been working on and off for the last few months. And I bought a 4-pack of 6-inch, what looked to be replacements for can lights. And they're meant to be new construction or retrofit. But the thing that really bugged me is the junction boxes. So there's a transformer for every light, which first off doesn't make any sense to me. Why have like low voltage lighting if you have to have an AC line running to every one? So that was weird. And then the other thing that annoyed me was, these are daisy chained because that's the way the original like fluorescent lights in the basement were run. So you have to jam 4 14 conductor wires with ground in these tiny junction boxes, which, they're rated for that many wires, but getting them in there is ridiculous. And I'm just like, why does it have to be so junky?
I think we can talk about that in our after show topic of houses as a system. Because if you think about the electrical system of a house, you're now trying to plug in something that was never conceptualized to be part of that system into it. So it becomes on the manufacturer to figure out how to take this LED can replacement and make it a viable product for the most amount of people, which is why they're both new construction and remodel and can fit in your old system like what you were going through.
Unfortunately, it also comes to the least amount of dollars, which drives me nuts. Why does it have to be the race to the bottom if you go to the home center and buy light fixtures? And they were all about the same price, so I have no expectation that any of them are better.
And you don't even have a Menards by you, so you haven't even hit the bottom yet. Their specialty is the bottom in some of the light fixtures and other things like that they sell.
They
sell great stuff too, but they are also purveyors of the bottom.
Light fixtures, I think, generally are made cheaply, and I'm guessing that's because that's what people buy. More on this comes from Carson. Hi, FHB crew. I found your discussion of low voltage lighting very illuminating. I had similar issues with what you described. Electricians generally don't want to touch it, and when I found some that did, others in the same company refused to install them. I'm using multiple types of low voltage lights inside and outside my home. Generally, they're actually landscape/deck lights that are also usable indoors. This allowed me to run low voltage wiring through and on top of the timbers in my timber frame build. There's no routing electrical boxes or mounting them above the beams. I can just surface mount them. Transformers are put in closets, pictures attached. The world of low voltage is confusing. Many are actually monopoint track lights, but still require 120 volt to the single track point. Do not expect local lighting shops to be of much help here. I think that's what I was just saying. Why do you need a transformer in every fixture?
Jeff, are you going to add the snare drum rim shot in post-production after the opening joke that writer had?
We could do that.
Yeah, boy, I tell you, LED lighting has sparked a flurry of emails to the podcast email box. Thanks for that.
Welcome to episode 600 of the Fine Lighting Podcast. You were the Fine Air Sealing and Insulation Podcast for a while. Now we're the Fine Lighting Podcast.
I think you've totally hit upon something, Ian, earlier when you said our houses were never built to have these things, so we're trying to figure it out. And I'm guessing, before too long, it'll be like Cat 5 and other similar low voltage networking things will figure it out. But we're not there yet. This comes from Phil. So, after getting many of us accustomed to shingling right over a Huber zip system on roofs, no tar paper or other underlayment, this past year Huber has started selling/recommending a whole roof peel and stick product. What gives? Should those of us who followed their previous recommendations now lose sleep because there was a need for an additional membrane? It ties into your whole discussion of whether or not whole roof peel and stick is a good idea or not. It certainly would seem to make a change of a standard roof leak in the field pretty much zero. Valleys and flashing and penetrations, of course, another matter. Thank you for your weekly lively discussions, Phil. So had you heard about this? I hadn't heard about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that if you really dig to the bottom of it, Huber realized that they were missing out on making some money that otherwise Grace and other waterproofing
Benjamin Opdyke and
manufacturers had been making.
So, have you anyone used this? I'm guessing not.
No.
If you're using this as just for the ice and water barrier at your eaves, which is a code requirement, then you're not. I don't think. Whether Huber ever suggested that you don't need ice and water membrane at the eave or not doesn't really matter because the codes require it. So they came out with a product to do that. As Ian said, they can get to compete with some other people and just have a more robust system. If the question is, should we ever have relied on zip sheathing without an additional roof underlayment, as protection for our roofs? And should we be losing sleep over that? I don't know. I guess there are definitely some things to be considered there. One of the fascinating things to me about zip sheathing and the way that, in the popularity that it has, and I understand all the efficiencies that goes along with it. And this isn't to bash the product at all, but one of the fascinating things about it is the same builders who, preach positive lapping, shingle style lapping of all your flashing and of all your house wrap, now rely on tape to do that. And that's not positive lapping. In fact, tape is a reverse lap. And maybe these tapes perform well enough that that's a safe thing to do. However, and maybe on walls, perfectly fine. However, I've always wondered, like on a roof where roofs are not vertical, so you have some level of a pitch. Water's not, and especially water that gets beneath a roofing material, which isn't going anywhere very fast. I've always sort of been a little skeptical as zip sheathing alone as roof protection. And I think I didn't have a choice on my house because the roofer that I used gives a lifetime warranty on their work and their products, but you have to install the system that they want to install, and it included an additional underlayment on top of the zip. I think I would have made that same decision if I were making it on my own. Not necessarily Zip's product or a peel and stick product, but just a roof underlayment, whether it was tar paper or a synthetic product with real laps.
Yeah, I had the same thing with my roofer, Brian. They wanted to use CertainTeed's underlayment along with the shingles to get the warranty, which was, like you said, totally fine by me. I think you hit on something that Christine Williamson's done a lot of work on with the overdriven fasteners and showing that you need the water column pressure from the buildup of water that gets trapped between two sandwich building materials to actually back up into those assemblies and make things like the incorrect lapping fail. And I think you do get that when you're talking about an asphalt shingle nailed down to zip. So I think the underlayment, especially if it's required by the manufacturer of the roof product, I think is a good way to go.
I've always heard that it's a good idea, and part of the idea underlayment is a decoupling of the asphalt roofing from the sheathing because they move at different amounts, and that always made sense to me. I'm curious, if you put your shingles right on top of zip, my guess is the ceiling strips stick it right down to the sheathing, right?
Yep.
So more on this, I reached out to Chris Cook, who's the content marketing manager for Huber Engineered Woods, and he was kind enough to respond quickly. He says, great questions. Long story short, offering the Zip PSU, peel and stick underlayment, allows the builder to basically select the level of protection they want to fit their job site requirements and budget. The full PSU over zip sheathing and tape is the highest level of protection and most expensive. Zip sheathing and tape with PSU at ease, valleys, and transition, excellent protection and mid-priced. Zip sheathing and tape without the PSU, all the benefits of a sealed roof deck and great protection at the lowest price. The primary purpose of the product is to be an ice barrier, but it can also be used as a full roof underlayment over zip system sheathing or regular OSB or plywood if the builder or designer wants more protection and if the roof covering calls for it. So thanks, Chris. I think all of these protection methods are part of the fortified roof system, which I'm guessing you're going to be hearing more about as the insurance companies get more states to adopt practices that make their buildings more resilient so they don't need to pay out as much property
Or they'll
claims.
just pull up sticks and leave certain states.
Oh, man, you're right. We've seen the insurance industry get the automobile manufacturers to change how they build cars in decades past. And I think we're seeing the same push with the emphasis on home building going on right now. This comes from Buzz. Buzz says, checking back in with you guys, you answered one of my previous questions about the feasibility of ground level decks. I took your advice and built a paver patio. It's been a wonderful addition to the backyard and we use it all the time. Unfortunately, I didn't dig any footers for a future pergola, and we would now like some sort of shade structure over the patio. Are there any setups that would have a clear span of 26 feet? I don't particularly want to tear up the existing 24-foot long patio for middle supports. I couldn't have a clear span that long, which seems likely. Do you have any recommendation for a cantilevered pergola plan shade sail setup? I'm in Cincinnati, so we'll have to deal with some small amounts of snow. Buzz, okay, so you want to add a shade structure to your existing patio. Any ideas, gents?
So I looked up the pressure-treated LVL that I used for my deck, and there are assemblies that can span that or more. They're very large, and they're probably very expensive, and they would need to be clad in some kind of trim material to keep them from getting wet. They probably would need to be well flashing taped, but if he would go to, a real home center that services the local building contractors in Cincinnati, they should be able to get him either a pressure treated glue lam that could do this or the pressure treated LVLs from Pacific Wood Tech.
How deep are they going to be, Ian? They're going to be huge, right?
I think 5.5 by 18 looks like the winning arrangement to me.
Woo.
Can I suggest that maybe we right from the beginning we're all overthinking this? Because for two things. Number one, this is a pergola, not a house. And number two, I believe the IRC allows for this span with 2x10 ceiling joists for when you're only supporting the dead loads of an attic floor. So this is a pergola. So why not use 2x10s and span his whole 24 feet with dimensional lumber and not worry about it?
And get on with your life.
I think it depends on how he intends to construct the pergola. So he is in Cincinnati, so you could get theoretical wet snow load on the pergola depending on how he's going to strap it and leave leave gaps to get sunlight through. I agree with you, Brian. If he's just going to do sailcloth or something like that for shade, yeah, do it out of dimensional lumber and build your own glue lam, out of 2x10s. But I think he does need to think a little bit about the overall construction of it and whether or not it's going to connect to the house. I think that's the other part that would need to come into consideration on this.
Because then you only have half the tributary load. Is that your thinking, Ian?
Well, I think if you start connecting things to houses, it falls under a different aspect of the building code. And if he is in a city municipality where they have a possible stronger regulatory presence than, say, out in the country or out in rural Ohio, they may look at that as a different type of structure than just a pergola.
I was thinking, we're not talking about huge loads here. Couldn't you just put 6x6s bearing on the pavers? Is that crazy?
I think because he gets freeze and thaw, you wouldn't want to do that.
I also thought about pulling up 1 or 2 or 4 or 8 pavers and having a helical pile driven right into the patio, right? And then just put the pavers back.
I think that's a really good idea, Patrick, to maybe move your bearing points in a little bit to shrink that 26 down to 20. And then you are starting to get into things that fit standard dimensional lumber.
And geez, if you took up just a few pavers, you could dig with a post hole digger too, and put in a concrete pier or
helical piers are so much fun.
Oh yeah, and you make a call and then you start building the next day. That's the amazing part. Less digging. Jeff, you have thoughts on this? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I would agree with what you were saying, that it's a patio. You can alter it. You don't, it's not a poured slab. Even a poured slab, you could cut a hole in.
Drill.
Drill.
Well, the other question there, I mean, he can definitely alter the patio. The other question there is design. If it's a patio, how's it using it, and does he really want a post in the middle of it or a couple
Right.
posts in the middle of it? I like your idea. I don't know who said this, Patrick or Ian, but just kind of coming in from the edges a little bit, taking up some stones to get some footings, some sort of footings in, and then you've shrunken the long span, and you can still cantilever outside of
Right.
that a little bit to cover more of the patio. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what he comes up with, because I'm planning a similar kind of project next year. So send us photos when you're done.
And send us photos of what you got right now, Buzz, because I'm curious what you're working with. We might have some more insights if we get inspiration from the space. This comes from Not Painter, NOT, or KNOT, excuse me. I've always been told that PVA primer is the right first coat for new drywall, but I've found its hiding qualities lacking, and it's among the cheapest primers out there. Is there something better we should be using on new drywall to prepare it for a top coat? Besides cost, is there any reason you shouldn't use something like Fresh Start or an equivalent high-quality primer on new drywall? Do you guys have thoughts on this? Like, what did you all do in your new builds?
I did PVA, but I'm wondering what you're trying to hide when it comes to new drywall. That's the part that kind of makes me, as a non-painter, kind of turn my head and go, what's with that comment?
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Ian. I just thought, exactly that's exactly why you can use PVA, an inexpensive PVA primer, is because you're really just looking for bonding, right? You don't need to solve any problems. And sure, go ahead and use something better if it's in your budget. I've been just lately, I've been so curious about, manufacturers are doing amazing things these days, coming up with better materials. But I've been so curious about, and concerned with the costs of home building, that I just wonder where better is unnecessary and just driving up costs. And I have to feel like it would be maybe for some projects that this is not a cost that needs to be considered, going from PVA to something like Fresh Start. But every one of those decisions that we make drives up the cost of a project, and they're already building a house and remodeling a house already pretty expensive.
So I have great familiarity with the prices involved here, because I'm not painter, to be honest. So I had this question. I put a drywall ceiling in Carol's gardening room, and I look up the price of Fresh Start. I've used it. I love the primer. It has great hide. And as you suggest, Brian, it's a much bigger deal when you're talking about an existing space, right? Not new drywall. You want to cover up the existing color or stains or whatever it is. So I researched, and you can buy 2 gallons of PVA primer for about $20 at the home center, whereas the Fresh Start was $32 from my paint store. So yeah, if you're talking about a whole house, it can be a lot of money. I decided I did not want to use the PVA because, first off, I didn't need 2 gallons of it. I needed a gallon, and it's not good for anything else except for new drywall. Whereas the Fresh Start, if I didn't finish it, I can use it for almost anything after the fact. And what I'll tell you is, when it comes to the hiding, it made a first top coat, cover really well. And the sheen is uniform, which is something that you can have variability with when you're using a cheap primer. Between the drywall compound and the drywall surface, you will get what is, I think, described as flashing. It shows those things, and this solved that. And the other thing it did, which I cannot say the same about PVA, is it leveled much better. So it further made for a more uniform surface. So my anecdotal research is, if you got a small project and you don't want to have to make 3 top coats, consider a better primer, and you'll get a more uniform finish with 2 or 1 even. So there you go.
Patrick, earlier this summer, before I had come back to work here, I had a whole bunch of sort of handyman work that I had been hired to do. And one of the projects, it was all at these 2 houses that were sort of owned by the same people and sort of part of the same property. And one of the projects was to put a fresh coat of paint on their garage doors. And of course, just note to future self, next time you get asked if you can just freshen my garage doors up with freshen anything up with a coat of paint, the answer is probably not. I ended up having to take the doors down to bare wood in the hot sun, and it was sort of a really tough job that I hadn't set out to do. But to make a long story short, I ended up using a paint product that I had never used before, which was the Regal from Benjamin Moore. And speaking of manufacturers just making products that are better and better, I've heard this over and over and over again about paints, but it was the first paint that I felt like really laid down like an old oil paint. That was really, just really laid down smooth. It was self-leveling. It was, I'll be curious to see how it holds up. It was just really remarkable to work with.
Self-leveling quality of paints has improved so much, at least if you're talking about the middle to higher end. It's incredible, right?
Yeah. When you're just sort of watching those brush strokes disappear as you're brushing something out, it's really sort of gives you confidence that the end result is going to look really nice.
Yeah, I have, through my own hard learned experience, that paint is not a place to cut corners. It is worth spending some money to get good paint, because it ends up being less work.
Mm-hmm.
Mark's got a long one here, folks, so bear with me, but it's a pretty interesting question, and I'll just let Mark speak for himself here. Hi, guys and gals. I've been listening to most episodes of the podcast for a few years now and have been an on-again, off-again subscriber to the magazine. As a homeowner that tries to DIY as many things as I can, I really enjoy all the product all of you work so hard to put out. My wife and I moved last year from the house and my first wife had built in 1985 in the Twin Cities metro area to a spec house built in 2021 about an hour north of the Twin Cities. The 1985 house was a two-story with a basement walkout starter home built to the typical mid-80s standards with a simple single-zone forced air furnace and air conditioning and no mechanical ventilation. The 2021 house has a tankless combination boiler delivering in-floor hydronic heat and domestic hot water with a forced air furnace and central air conditioning, along with a mechanical heat recovery ventilation system. This house is a single-story design built on a slab with a natural gas-fired ceiling-mounted heater in the finished and insulated garage. I have been through all the user manuals and installation manuals for the boiler, the furnace and air conditioner, the furnace AC programmable thermostat, and the floor hydronic thermostats, all of the same model. The HRV's dehumidistat wall controller, the bath fan that one of the two bathroom uses, the other bathroom uses the HRV system as an exhaust fan. The house also has a pass-on radon mitigation system installed, as I believe all homes, at least in Minnesota, are required to have, and makeup air ducting in the small mechanical room off the garage. What is sorely lacking is a proper overview of how all these systems are supposed to work together and how controls should be set to provide optimum comfort and air quality during the different times of the year in Minnesota. The home builder has been helpful and pleasant in answering my questions both before we bought the house and afterward, especially considering we were not the original client that had the house built. The original owner lived here about 6 months before turning tail back to Florida after experiencing a Minnesota winter firsthand. If you came from Florida and moved to Minnesota, yeah, I can imagine that would be a adjustment. Besides the thermometers and the 5 thermostats and the hygrometer in the furnace AC thermostat, I also monitor air quality with an AirThings View Plus that measures radon, particulate matter, CO2, humidity, VOCs, temperature, and barometric pressure. The HRV is set to intermittent operation rather than continuous in the summer based on the manufacturer's recommendations. I struggle to keep indoor humidity below 50%. I find myself having to manually turn the HRV on and off based on outdoor humidity and indoor radon readings. If indoor humidity starts to get into the mid 50s, I turn the dehumidistat off. The AC will then eventually bring down the humidity levels. The furnace/AC thermostat has a dehumidification function where you can program a set point for humidity. I have it set at 45. You can also program an overcooling amount where the AC will run after it has reached the temperature set point. I have this set at 76, and the AC will run to 74 degrees if it needs to dehumidify the air. The overcooling is adjustable, and as obvious, I have it set at 2 degrees. Obviously, this house is much tighter and energy efficient than the house that I was used to for 37 years, but I would never have guessed that the HVAC controls will require so much monitoring and manual adjusting to maintain a desirable indoor air quality, meaning humidity, radon level, and general freshness/stuffiness. Now that we're getting into the cooler time of the year, I'm considering working in the attic where it will be more enjoyable. I'm going to have the passive radon mitigation system turned into an active system by a local contractor. I'm hoping then I can simply adjust the ventilation controls to concentrate on indoor humidity, and I won't have to pay attention to increasing radon levels when I have the dehumidistat turned off. Supposedly, the HRV is supposed to function intermittently with no input from the dehumidistat, but it appears it doesn't provide enough air exchanges to keep the radon levels at an acceptable level. While the HRV being activated by the dehumidifier controller, I can get and keep radon levels easily below 2 picocuries per liter, but I have seen levels as high as 4.6 when the controller is off. Mark, thanks for the letter. My goodness, that must have taken a long time to write up. Mark had another question, but that's for another episode. What do you guys think? This is a complicated system. What do we do here?
I'm exhausted just from listening to you read that. Like, I need a nap before I can consider any answer to that question, I think.
I think that question is way beyond me as a holistic kind of question. There were 2 things that jumped out at me, and they both relate to the HRV. And one was sort of the intermittent use of the HRV in the summer. I'm not sure why the manufacturer recommends that, but if you're not opening windows and ventilating your house otherwise, turning it off at any time doesn't seem to make sense to me. That's your source of bringing fresh air into the house. So otherwise, you're just living with the air that's in the house, and maybe you're filtering it through other filters in ductwork, but that didn't necessarily make sense to me. And also, just one other thing to mention is using an HRV for bath ventilation can work, but typically if you use that bathroom for any significant showering with hot water, it would at a minimum need a boost function, I think, to effectively and timely clear what needs to be cleared from that bathroom.
I was fixated on the 45% humidity. Mark, you're never going to get your house down to 45. It's just like maybe in the winter. No chance. It's funny. My portable dehumidifier can go down to 40 degrees. And they might as well just say, run forever. Because
run
it's
until
never
it blows up.
It's never going to shut off, because the more you dehumidify, the more vapor movement you get from the outside or the soil or wherever it's coming from. So I think that's just a fool's errand to try and get it down that low. If you can keep it at 50%, I think you'll be comfortable, and it's probably fine for the house.
Yeah, 50 or 55, and I think he's got the right idea in turning that radon system into an active one, because it seems like he keeps going back to the radon levels as something that's triggering the tinkering with the settings of the rest of the equipment. We'll probably get into this with the after show topic again of houses as a system, but one thing that just drives me absolutely insane with some of the tight buildings is the unbelievably complex HVAC systems that we're putting in them, and whether or not they're truly necessary. And to Brian's earlier point, all they're doing is just adding unbelievable costs to building a house, when you should be able to build a tight house and put a simple HVAC system in it. Instead, you're putting in, sometimes north of $100,000, which could be 10 to 15% of the build cost, into an HVAC system that you have to have an engineering degree to know how to operate. that is just going to be outside of what most people are going to put the time and effort into.
I asked Mark about the forced air system heating, and if you have in-floor hydronics system, the redundancy of also having a forced air system, I didn't quite get, but he said it's for the shoulder seasons when you don't want so much heat, or you want it right away because you get up in the morning and the house is cool from being overnight. And a radiant system doesn't respond that quickly, but you can turn on a furnace and get warm air and be comfortable relatively quickly. And, most folks want air conditioning now, so you need ductwork to distribute cool air, so hence the redundancy. But, as you suggest, this is complicated and expensive. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Ian that the idea of converting that radon system to an active system sounds like something that has to be done. And the idea of trying to use the HRV for multiple functions seems like that's complicating everything. I think, if humidity is the issue, I think it needs to be addressed separately.
Can we talk about something here? So I've, in recent years, seen a transition from the recommendations for HRVs for heating climates and ERVs for cooling climates. It now seems like the general recommendations is ERVs are a better choice for almost all climates. Have you guys observed that same change in thinking?
I've observed the change, but I also have an HRV, so I am not capturing the humidity. I am just capturing temperature change between the air. I think that's the big difference, at least in my understanding of the two systems, is the ERV is both exchanging humidity content and temperature as it moves air from the inside to the outside. Whereas an HRV
So if
is
I'm to interpret that, you tell me if I got it right. That would seem to help Mark's situation with elevated humidity if he had an ERV versus the HRV. Is that correct? Would that help lower his indoor humidity?
To my understanding of the system, yes. And depending on the manufacturer, it could be as simple as a core change, which is the filter element, so to speak, between your exhaust and your supply air on an ERV. I have a Honeywell HRV, and if I wanted to, I could get an ERV core for it, and it would just be a change in the giant square filter element that's inside the unit.
I think that the important thing to note, Patrick, about that, about what you just said, is that, an ERV is still not a dehumidifier. So, it can be helpful in maintaining the levels that you're creating inside your house, but it's not a dehumidifier. And yes, and if you're creating, the dry temperature or the dry relative humidity that you're looking for in your house in the summertime, for example, and as you are exhausting some of that drier air and bringing in some more humid, summer air in through the energy exchanger in the ERV, it's the humid air is going to give up some of that moisture to that dry air that's going out. So you're going to bring in less humid air, and that's sort of how it's helpful. But it's not a dehumidifier. And if you have, you have to get that humidity level to where you want it first. So that still might require dehumidification in your house, whether that's through your air conditioning or a dedicated dehumidifier.
I would also take a look at how the basement was constructed and make sure that you're not missing something in the construction of the basement from the waterproofing or other moisture mitigations. Being in Minnesota, I'm sure he's got a 8 or 9 foot deep basement, and depending on how that was detailed, he may be pulling moisture in from the ground, which could be negatively impacting.
Well, it's on a slab, and the slab might be contributing to indoor humidity, but
okay.
Just to be clear, it doesn't have a basement. So
yeah, I missed that part of the.
I don't know how you missed that. This was all very clear.
I think that the general point though, what he's saying is like, yeah, figure out if there's a source of humidity in your house that you need to deal with.
I'm also going to tell Mark to experiment with one thing at a time. You know, like when we're
start
trying
with
to
the radon.
Start with the radon, see if that helps, if that, and then move, like you got to do it a step at a time. Otherwise, you don't know what's helping or hurting. So, Mark, so your other question about adding water to your hydronic infloor system, I emailed Mike Lombardi and got a great response from him yesterday on the things that could be going on there. You're going to have to stay tuned till the next episode because we used up your allotted time on this show. But it's an interesting subject. Should you have to add water to your boiler with any regularity? And the answer is way more complex than I could have ever imagined. So you all will want to stay tuned to hear what Mike says about that because, once again, it's science. Can you tell I love doing this show? It's so much fun. And I thank all you for listening. And boy, 600, who could have imagined? And it's because of you all listening that we can do this. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, it's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Ian, Brian, and Jeff for joining me. And thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Stay tuned for the members-only after show where we're going to talk about houses as a system. You'll have to tell me what that means, Brian.